About Iacides himself the kings of Greece were placed, entreating him to food. And he entreated them, entreating him to food. And he entreated them as fast, still intermixing words and sighs. If any friend were there of all his dearest, they would cease and offer him no cheer but his due sorrows. For before the sun had left that sky, he would not eat, but of that day sustain the extremity. Thus all the kings in resolute grief and fasting he dismissed. But both the Atrides, Ithacus, and war's old martialist, Idomeneus and his friend, and Phoenix, these remained. War's old martialist, Idomeneus, and his friend, and Phoenix, these remained, endeavoring comfort, but no thought of his vowed woe restrained. Nor could, till that day's bloody fight had calmed his blood, he still remembered something of his old friend, whose good. Nor could, till that day's bloody fight had calmed his blood, he still remembered something of his old friend. He still remembered something of his friend, whose good was all his ill. There urging meet the diligent fashion of his. All right, let's pull in Achilles here because he's about to talk. Who else is gonna probably Thetis? Maybe Thetis. We know that Xanthus. I'm pretty sure it's Xanthus is going to talk to him, but we obviously don't have a voice for Xanthus yet. I'm kind of fascinated of what tradition that moment of Xanthus talking comes from. Robert Graves in his book, The Greek Myths, has a lot of really great, he's trying to basically, intuit what ancient traditions some of these, kind of out-of-place moments come from in the Iliad and other sources. The talking horse moment is kind of there's no precedent for that anywhere else. So I'm curious where that originates from. Anyway, no Xanthus yet, but we have Achilles. Let's listen to Achilles here. Let us ask some prophet, priest, or prove some dream interpreter. Endeavoring comfort, but no thought of his vowed woe restrained, nor could, till that day's bloody fight had calmed his blood. He still remembered something of his friend, whose good was all his ill. Their urging meet the diligent fashion of his friend renewed in that excitement. Thou, said he, when this speed was pursued against the Trojans, evermore opposedst in my tent a pleasing breakfast, being so free and sweetly diligent, thou madest all meat sweet. Then the war was tearful to our foe, but now to me. Then the war was tearful to our foe, but now to me. Thy wounds so wound me, and thy overthrow, for which my ready food I fly, and on thy longings feed. Nothing could more afflict me. Fame relating the foul deed of my dear father's slaughter, blood drawn from my sole son's heart, no more could wound me. Cursed man that could wound me. cursed man, that in his foreign part, for hateful Helen, my true love, my country, sire and son, I should thus part with. And son, I thus should part with. Skyros now gives education, O Neoptolemus, to thee, if living yet, from whence I hoped, dear friend, thy longer life safely returned from hence, and my life quitting thine, had power to ship him home, and show his young eyes Phthia, subjects and court. My father being now dead, or most short-lived, troublous age oppressing him, and fear still of my death, oppressing him, and fear still of my death's news. These sad words he blew into the ear of every visitant with sighs, all echoed by the peers, remembering who they left at home, all whose human tears Jove pitied, and since they all would in the good of one be much revived, he thus bespake Minerva. All right, let's pull in Jove and possibly Minerva. And my power to give it act approve, how vain her strife is. Be much revived, he thus bespake Minerva. Thetis' son, now, daughter, thou hast quite forgot. Oh, is Achilles' care extinguished in thee? Quite forgot. Has quite forgot. Oh, is Achilles' care extinguished in thee? Prostrated. Oh, is Achilles' care extinguished in thee? Prostrated in most extreme ill fare he lies before his high-sailed fleet for his dead friend. The rest are strengthening him with meat, but he lies desperately oppressed with heartless fasting. The rest are strengthening him with meat, but he lies desperately oppressed with heartless fasting. Go thy ways, and to his breast instill red nectar and ambrosia, that fast procure no ill to his near enterprise. That fast procure no ill to his near enterprise. That fast procure no ill to his near enterprise. This spur he added to the free, and like a harpy, with a voice that shrieks so dreadfully, and feathers that like needles pricked, she stooped through all the stars among the Grecians, all whose tents were now filled for the wars. Her sails struck through Achilles' tent, and closely she instilled heaven's most to be desired feast to his great breast, and filled his sinews with that sweet supply, for fear unsavory fast should creep into his knees. Herself the skies should creep into his knees. Herself the skies again enchased. Herself the skies again enchased. Into his knees. Herself the skies again enchased. The host set forth, and poured his steel waves far. Enchased. The host set forth, and poured his steel waves far out of the fleet. And as from the air the frosty north wind blows a cold, thick sleet that dazzles eyes, flakes after flakes incessantly. And as from the frosty north wind blows a cold, thick sleet that dazzles eyes, flakes after flakes incessantly descending, so thick helms, curates, ashen darts, and round shields never-ending. Round shields never-ending flowed from the navy's hollow womb. Their splendors gave heaven's eye his beams again. Earth laughed to see her face so like the sky. Earth laughed to see her face so like the sky. Arms shined so hot, and she such clouds made with the dust she cast. She thundered, feet of men and horse importuned her so fast, in midst of all. Of men and horse importuned her so fast. Let's just check that. I don't think I have a pronunciation importune? Importuned. 3 syllables with the primary stress on the final syllable. Tuned. Okay, now this one says importune. Okay. Hate when that happens. Let's check some more sources. Hold on. Okay, we're going to go with importuned. Okay, let's put it into the master guide here. Actually, I should put it into the chapter guide, which will then get transferred to the master guide. Okay. Again, you know, you might not really think about how much you have to keep straight when you're doing an audiobook, but I don't pretend to be so, smart that I can. There's over 1,000 entries of words to pronounce in this guide that I'm building, only for the first 19 chapters or books so far. And, I don't pretend that I'll be able to keep all those straight unless I write them all down and very, strictly check. Otherwise, I'll be, using the pronunciation one way in chapter 2 and then another way in chapter 20 or whatever. Okay. Because the other thing too is like, I started recording, right now it's May 5th, and I think I started like 2 months ago recording. It's not as fast of a process as you might think to record an audiobook. So, there's a lot of just raw time between these things. So you can't necessarily keep it all straight in your head. Okay, where was this here? There we go. Earth laughed to see her face so like the sky. Arms shined so hot, and she such clouds made with the dust she cast. With the dust she cast, she thundered. Feet of men and horse importuned her so fast, in midst of all, divine Achilles his fair person armed. His teeth gnashed as he stood. In midst of all, divine Achilles his fair person armed. His teeth gnashed as he stood, his eyes so full of fire they warmed, unsuffered grief and anger at the Trojans so combined. His greaves first used, his goodly curates on his bosom shined, his sword, his shield that cast a brightness from it like the moon. And as from sea sailors discern a harmful fire let run by herdsmen's faults, till all their stall flies up in wrestling flame, which, being on hills, is seen far off, but being alone, none came to give it quench. At shore, no neighbors, and at sea, their friends driven off with tempests. Such a fire from his bright shield extends his ominous radiance, and in heaven impressed his fervent blaze. ominous radiance, and in heaven impressed his fervent blaze. His crested helmet, grave and high, had next triumphant place on his curled head, and like a star it cast a spurry ray, about which a bright, thickened bush of golden hair did. It cast a spurry ray, about which a bright, thickened bush of golden hair did play, which Vulcan forged him for his plume. Thus complete armed, he tried how fit they were, and if his motion could with ease abide their brave instruction. And so far they were from hindering it, that to it they were nimble wings, and made so light his spirit, that from the earth the princely captain they took up to air. And made so light his spirit, that from the earth the princely captain they took up to air. Then from his armory he drew his lance, his father's spear, huge, weighty, firm. Then from his armory he drew his lance, his father's spear, huge, weighty, firm, that not a Greek but he himself alone knew how to shake. It grew upon the mountain Pelion, from whose height Chiron hewed it for his sire, and fatal 'twas to great-souled men, and Peleus and Pelion. Hold on, let's check the master guide here for this. I can't remember if I tried to make a differentiation between Peleus and Pelion, the mountain versus the man. Sometimes I do it as Pelion. I don't have it in the master guide, which means I haven't done it yet? Okay. Okay. See, the interesting thing about trying to pronounce this is that this is a really interesting moment where Chapman does something that I don't think I've heard any translator do out of the many, many translations I've read so far. He gives the spear a name, and then he refers to the spear by its name throughout this rest of the book a lot of times. And so it's saying, of Peleus, father of Achilles, and Pelion, the mountain, surnamed Peleus, which is to say he gave the spear the name Peleus because of Peleus and Pelion. But it sounds weird if you're saying, like, Peleus chopped this guy's head off, because it sounds like you're talking about Peleus, father of Achilles. And so maybe if we made it Peleus, the father, and Pelion, the mountain, he surnamed Peleus, which is to say it's like a combination of the two names, but still sounds different than Peleus. I think that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I had written down originally. Because this one's in two parts, I had done this pronunciation guide a while ago, so I didn't remember which. I think that's my logic with that. And I think that makes the most sense. Because it's weird for when Chapman is referring to Achilles' ash spear by saying, Peleus stabbed into this guy's throat or whatever. It just sounds like you're talking about the Argonaut Peleus. Okay. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to say, upon the mountain Pelion, huge, weighty, firm, that not a Greek but he himself alone knew how to shake. It grew upon the mountain Pelion, from whose height Chiron hewed it for his sire, and fatal 'twas to great-souled men, of Peleus and Pelion, surnamed Peleus. Then from the stable their bright horse Automedon withdraws, and Alcimus, put poitrils on, and cast upon their jaws their bridles, hurling back the reins, and hung them on the seat. The fair scourge then Automedon, The fair scourge then automaton takes up, and up doth get to guide. Takes up, and up doth get to guide the horse. The fight's seat last Achilles took behind, who looked so armed as if the sun there fallen from heaven had shined, and there fallen from this as if the sun there fallen from heaven had shined, and terribly thus charged his steeds. Xanthus and Balius, seed of the Harpy. Xanthus and Balius, seed of the Harpy, in the charge ye undertake of us, discharge it not, as when Patroclus ye left dead in field. But when with blood, for this day's fast observed, revenge shall yield our heart's satiety. Revenge shall yield our heart's satiety, bring us off. Fast observed, revenge shall yield. For this day's fast observed, revenge shall yield our heart's satiety, bring us off. Our heart's satiety, bring us off. Thus, since Achilles spake as if his odd steeds understood, 'twas Juno's will to make vocal the palate of the one, who, shaking his fair head, which in his mane let fall to earth, he almost buried, thus Xanthus spake. He almost buried, thus Xanthus spake. All right, let's make a note for Xanthus. Again, the logic of this, because Xanthus never speaks again. It's actually explicitly said in the thing that the Furies stop him from ever speaking again. But the reason we write a note for it is because in case I ever have to come back and do a pickup line where I re-record the part that he says, I want to have a reference file. So it's just part of the discipline of me doing this, that I never say like, oh, I'm not going to do that voice again. I won't make a note of when it appears, because that's how you cause problems later in the production process. Okay, let's try and come up with a Xanthus voice. I don't know if we want to do like a horse-like voice. Let's see. Ablest Achilles, now at least our care shall bring thee off. Maybe something like that, like he's struggling to speak. He almost buried, thus Xanthus spake, which in his mane let fall to earth, he almost buried. Thus Xanthus spake. Ablest Achilles, now at least our care shall bring thee off, but not far hence, the fatal minutes are of thy grave ruin. Nor shall we be then to be reproved, but mightiest fate and the great God. Nor shall we be then to be reproved, but mightiest fate and the great God. Nor was thy best beloved spoiled so of arms by our slow pace or courage's impair. The best of gods, Latona's son, that wears the golden hair, gave him his death's wound, though the grace he gave to Hector's hand. We, like the spirit of the west, that all spirits can command for power of wing, could run him off. But thou thyself must go. So fate ordains. God and a man must give thee overthrow. But thou thyself must go. So fate ordains. God and a man must give thee overthrow. God and a man must give thee overthrow. I don't know if we want to do it where it's like he's losing his voice as he's finishing speaking. God, 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 and a man must give thee overthrow. God and a man must give thee overthrow. This said, the Furies stopped his voice. Achilles, far in rage. This said, the Furies stopped his voice. This said, the Furies stopped his voice. Achilles, far in rage, thus answered him, It fits not thee thus proudly to presage my overthrow. See, he's clearly trying to rhyme rage with presage, but we have it as presage, I believe. So this is another instance where you really have to it's very kind of like, it makes it sound like I'm making a mistake when you do an audiobook and you're pronouncing the same word differently at different points. But, we'll do it as fits the text. Achilles, far in rage, thus answered him, It fits not thee thus proudly to presage my overthrow. I know myself it is my fate to fall thus far from Thia. Yet that fate shall fail to vent her gall till mine vent thousands. Yet that fate shall fail to vent her gall till mine vent thousands. It fits not thee thus proudly to presage my overthrow. I know myself it is my fate to fall thus far from Thia. I know myself it is my fate to fall thus far from Thia. Yet that fate shall fail to vent her gall till mine vent thousands. Thus answered him, It fits not thee thus proudly to presage my overthrow. I know myself it is my fate to fall thus far. It is my fate to fall thus far from Thia. It is my fate to fall thus far from Thia. Yet that fate shall fail to vent her gall till mine vent thousands. Till mine vent thousands. These words he used, he fell to horrid. These words used, he fell to horrid deeds, gave dreadful signal, and forthright made fly his one-hoofed steeds. These words used, he fell to horrid deeds, gave dreadful signal, and forthright made fly his one-hoofed steeds. Gave dreadful signal, and forthright made fly his one-hoofed steeds. And forthright made fly his one-hoofed steeds.